Hi, good evening. Welcome to the February meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. It is 6:53 p.m. February 15th. I'd like to call this meeting to order. In pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted by remote participation. The recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. And with that, so we call the meeting to order. Usually what we like to do for folks who are listening is introduce ourselves. And we'll just go across my screen here. Mr. Falvey.
Hi there. My name is Ryan Falvey. I'm a resident of Ward 2.
Vice Chair Kelly.
I am Robin Kelly. I am the Realtor representative on the board, on the commission, and also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
Mr. Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I'm an attorney and I was trained as a city planner and I live in Spring Hill.
And I'll introduce myself and then staff. I'm Eric Parks. I'm the chair. I'm an architect, Ward 3 historic homeowner. And our staff, we have Ms. Chekowicz.
Hello, I'm a preservation planner. I'm planner for planning, preservation, and zoning.
And Ms. White.
And I'm Sarah White. I'm a senior planner with Preservation Planning and Zoning.
Thank you all. Okay, so going to our agenda. The first item on our list is 181 Broadway, an advisory review for the CPA funding. We're reviewing a draft preservation restriction. And this is just an advisory review, so we're not voting on this, correct?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So what you need to do is these are provided to you as an FYI. The terms of these preservation restrictions are negotiated between the legal department, the entity receiving the CPA grant awards, and the Massachusetts Historical Commission. These are preservation restrictions on the exterior of the building in perpetuity, the entire exterior envelope. And for that type of preservation restriction, the Massachusetts Historical Commission is required to review and approve the language for it. So they have already agreed to the language. We just have to send it out for their signature. And part of the process is for the Historic Preservation Commission to also sign the preservation restriction as well. So what we would need this evening is a motion and a roll call vote to allow the chair of the commission to sign the preservation restriction on behalf of the HPC.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. I've looked it over and have no comments. I don't know if anybody else wants a moment to look at it or if they have anything they want to add to it that would affect their opinion about whether we would go forward with signing this.
I do not. So I move that we vote to approve Chair Parks's signing of the document.
Okay, is there a second?
I second that motion.
Second.
Okay, well, all in favor? Say aye.
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 Opposed? We'll do a roll call. Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
And I say yes as well. So we'll move that forward.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You too. The next case before us is an alteration to a local historic district. It's only one in this category for the evening, and it's HPC Alt 2021.54, which is 49 through 55 Davis Square. The Somerville Theater is the applicant. The owner is BF Properties, Somerville Properties LLC. There are two items here. The first is a request to withdraw the application to install a sign, and the second is a retroactive commission approval for window installation. Do we have an applicant here tonight?
Yes, you do. Ann Vigorito is here and then her name disappeared.
Good evening, members of the board. Attorney Ann Vigorito. I'm also joined this evening by Richard Freeman. He is the president of the theater, as well as his contractor and his architect, Diane Lim. So I do believe they're all on. They did message me, they're all here, and I believe they're all registered. So if they could be unmuted, they'll stay muted on their end until it's necessary for them to speak. So we are before you this evening. First off, we are withdrawing our request for the sign. They've decided to take things in a different direction, but we are here relative to the windows that were installed on the second floor. Also, they would like to install the identical windows that have been installed on the second floor onto the third. I know at the last time we were here 2 meetings ago, there were questions or concerns about seeing the actual windows, and we did get some photos that I thought detailed much better with the questions and concerns. So I would like to start with that. I don't know if the board or the members have any questions regarding that, or.
This is Diane Lim, the architect for the project, and one of the things that I want to add to the hearing a couple of months ago was also a question about existing the brick mold details. So at the time, we didn't have enough data to share with you, but if you see the package, we provided all the details, existing details, and the contract did confirm that they installed the windows from the inside, so they were able to leave all the brick mold as they were within the window openings. And that also another thing that we confirmed with our submission for this hearing is that the window manufacturers detail on the material of the window, because there was a question about whether the window was a vinyl or metal clad and wood inside, and that we do confirm that that's the latter, which is I believe allowed in the district.
I'm sorry, the last thing you said I missed. You were talking about the window type?
The metal clad windows are, I believe, allowed to use in the district, the historic district, right?
Okay. We customarily allow the public to, if there's any member of the public who wants to speak, we should let them chime in before we take it up with the commission. So is there are there any members of the public who would like to speak about this case?
Any members of the public who'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And as a reminder, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes. Chair, I do not see anyone with their hands raised. I'm going to give it one more pass. All right, there's an, oh, we have one. All right, Chair, Ron Cavallo has his hand raised. Ron, you are self-muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess my question is, what are the windows in the building, and are the windows that are proposed consistent with the building?
Should I answer the question?
Yes, if you could answer that, that would be helpful.
Okay, so basically we replaced the existing 1/1 type windows. I believe it was inferior to what we ended up installing, and we didn't change any masonry opening, and then we didn't again change any brick mold details that were part of the building.
Chair, if I can interject, public comment is for the public to provide comment. It is not to engage a back and forth with either the applicant or the board at this time. So Ron, if you have any comments on the project you would like to give right now, that is what this time is for, and you will have the remainder of your 2 minutes to make those comments.
My comment, can I be heard?
Yes.
My comment is that it's significant that the brickwork is not being altered. It would appear that the windows that are proposed are consistent with the windows of the building. And I would support what they intend to do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. I think we usually, I'm not usually the one asking, but do we need to get an address for the members of the public who are speaking?
Typically, yes, but let me just check one more time.
I'm taking notes, that's why I asked.
Yes, we need to hit Ron's address. Ron, if you can provide us with your address, please.
Just,
Ron, are you there?
I am here.
Just for the record, so we know where you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I reside at 70 Victoria Street, Somerville, Mass.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Are there any other members of the public who want to speak about this case?
Anyone else wishing to give public comment, please raise your hand. All right, Chair, I do not see anyone else with their hands up. You can close public comment.
I will close public comment portion of this case. We can take it up. So just to recap, the brick mold was existing. From the photos, it actually looks like it might have been a metal replacement brick mold at some point. Doesn't look like it's the original wood one, but that's in that it's what was existing. That's neither here nor there. I think we had questions last time about the appropriate divisions. The windows that are there now match the divisions of the previous ones. There were some older photos going back in history, some that showed them 2/2, and then some others that were quite old showing it 1/1. So clearly this building has had a few generations of windows in it. I guess I'll throw this out to the commission. Anybody have any initial thoughts on this?
Hi, it's Vice Chair Kelly. I appreciate the additional information that the group has provided and that they've managed to confirm that the brick was not disturbed, that things were installed from the inside, and that they are metal clad as opposed to vinyl. So I feel reasonably okay retroactively approving the windows that were installed.
Thank you, Robin. Anybody else?
I just concur with Vice Chair Kelly, having looked at the pictures and hearing the update here. There doesn't seem to be any disturbance of the brick, and the windows look fine based on all the pictures and the literature here. So I support Vice Chair Kelly's position.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Anybody else? There's only one person who's anybody else at this point, or four of us.
Chair Parks, I was curious about your thoughts about the windows, and particularly the arched windows, and whether they seemed to you to be appropriate.
Yeah, I think the art, and then the applicant could correct me, but I believe the arch portion is existing. Is that correct? That it was not replaced?
Because they couldn't customize that arch without changing the division in between. So it was gonna look really thin from the existing the appearance of the arch. So we decided that it was a small enough of a glass panel that it was not gonna significantly damage the our effort to enhance the whole insulation condition of the exterior wall. So we decided to keep that portion.
Because it does look a little clunky to me, the mullions up there, just generally speaking, but I understand that's not what we're reviewing, so.
Yeah,
What it-
I mean, also, I think that it might be just sort of you know, layers of a paint and the gunk that got added on. You know, if we get a like go ahead to get the third floor windows replacement, I think that when we probably, I don't know whether we can look at it again, see if we can clean that up a little bit, but I think that it's just sort of the layers of things they added on over time.
Yeah, well, that's a metal. I assume that those transoms are metal, aren't they? The original?
That I'm not certain. I mean, inside is all stained wood. So I do not know.
Okay. But again, we're not reviewing those. Those were not replaced.
Okay.
And
So I am satisfied.
yeah, and my attitude is that I mean, technically an applicant can replace things in kind, so they could have come back with the exact same aluminum windows, same finish, and put them in there. So I tend to review these things as like, this is an improvement over what was there. You can look back through history and find a precedent for either divisions, 1/1 or 2/2, so that doesn't trouble me. And, you know, I'm fine with this. I think it's an improvement over what was there. In 30 years, we'll get a chance to replace them again when these fail, because these are disposable windows. So there we have it. So I'm okay with this as well.
Then if there are no other, oh, Ms. Chekowitz?
Yes, if I can just interrupt. The commission will also need to make a motion and vote on the withdrawal of the portion of the application for the sign.
Yes, thank you. So we need 2 motions. I guess we should first deal with the sign and then another motion on the windows.
So I move that we vote to accept the withdrawal of the sign application.
Second that motion.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor of approving that?
Aye.
Opposed? Roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And then so that motion carries. We need another motion to advance the window replacement.
I move that we vote to approve retroactively the installation of the windows.
I second that motion too.
Thank you. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I take that was your aye was the first one, Mr. Bauer? We'll do a roll call,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So there you have it, folks. Everyone,
Mr. Chair, it's Attorney Vigorito. We also had requested through staff the approval to change out the third floor windows to be identical to the second floor. It was included in the last packet. There was a written letter to request that because they thought it would be proper at this time to, do the third floor windows as well. And of course, then there would be much more symmetry because the second and third floor would be identical. And there was a request.
Ms.
I don't-
Chekowitz, I'm sorry.
I might have missed that. I don't have a memory of seeing that letter. But it may have been made. I believe you can vote on that now, as it is still within the realm of what was advertised legally.
So it's okay for us to discuss and vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, as long as I'm not seeing it in the agenda here. I mean, it is, I guess, in the sense that we're approving the window.
Correct. The legal ad is close enough to the same scope of work, so it can be voted on at this meeting.
Okay,
And so we
although
could indicate a conditional approval, provided that it's the same make and material of windows.
Correct.
Okay.
maybe what we should do, we can either say we indicate that we approve these for use on the third floor, or that we approve future installation of windows on the condition that they match these identically. I don't know which is the clean route.
If I may, I think the second option would allow for approval throughout, but I'm also getting a message from the other preservation planner who would like us to know that the third floor would probably be best.
Is the third floor. Okay. So I mean, there's no need to discuss this because we just did. But the motion would be to approve the use of a window on the third floor that matches identically by manufacturer, and et cetera, those that we just approved for the second floor. I don't know if you need to suggest that.
So I move that we vote to approve installation of windows on the third floor that match the existing or the newly installed windows, the specifications of the newly installed windows.
Okay.
That makes sense, material, et cetera.
Yeah, manufacturer, finish. Does that work?
Second motion.
Okay, Mr. Falvey seconds. All in favor of accepting that?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So I hope that clarifies things going forward for you. I think we are set with this case, right?
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board. Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, we appreciate your time and your indulgence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are moving up now to the determinations of historic significance. We have three. The first is HPC DMO 2022.01. It's 51 Broadway. The applicant is Ben Rogan, the owner is CDA Realty LLC, and the proposal is to demolish the principal structure. Do we have an applicant here for this project?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
since it looks like there are three applications for essentially the same larger plot, is it possible to talk about all of them together? I understand we need to vote on them individually, but I think it might be helpful if we discuss them together. And that's 51 and 53 Broadway and 11 Benedict Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, they will all need to be spoken individually and discussed individually and voted on individually. You can't take them, view them all as a larger project. They all have to be treated as if they are individual projects unrelated to each other.
Right.
Okay.
So I understand that we need to vote on them individually, but I don't see any reason that we can't discuss them collectively.
I imagine what would happen is if somebody is here theoretically for one particular building that's not the one that we're voting on, there would be a separate, opening and closing that case. That's the only reason I could think that someone might have, like we couldn't go back and retroactively talk about the Davis Square property now that we've voted on that. But I'm not
Sure.
here, so I don't want to get us out of bounds. Staff has recommended we address them individually, which might be the most prudent way to go about this. Obviously, we know it's a block of 3, so we all know what's happening.
Correct. And if I can just follow up, Mr. Chairman, it's also that legally we need to call each item separately, make public comment for each one separately, and discuss each one separately.
And that's what we've tended to do on previous cases and other hearings. We've had a few in the last year where we have 3 or 4 houses in a row. We do take them in separately.
Good. Well, we have, and I have found those discussions to be quite unsatisfying as a result. And so I was hoping that we would be able to take them as a group, even though we need to vote on them individually. But I don't think there's anything in the ordinance that requires us to discuss them individually.
I disagree. I think that it will be easiest, cleanest, and best if they are addressed individually, just as Ms. Chekowitz advised in terms of calling each number and receiving comment from the public. So if we could, I would be in favor of just getting underway with 51 Broadway.
Yeah, I see your point, Dick, but I think that I'd like to err on the side of caution here and just pick these off individually. And, we could look into this later and see if for future what we'll have to do, but there's a lot
I
to
yield to the rule of the chair as well as to the opinion of the vice chair.
Thank you for bringing that up, though. I hear your point there. Because yes, these are all obviously part of one project, but they're 3 separate items. So let's, where were we? Did we open that case already? We did. 51 Broadway, and we're waiting for an applicant to speak.
Yes, if the applicant for this item can raise their hand. I'm looking through to see who's here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Jordan Smith, or sorry, is that right?
Yes. Hi, you have Jordan Smith, Sullivan and Worcester Land Use Council for the applicant. Members of the commission, thank you for your hearing these tonight. We were, of course, very interested to hear your feedback, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have. But we'll assume that until then, and unless there's anything specific we need to answer, we can just be here as backup. I'll note that these 3 buildings, they're not actually in a row. 2 of them are next to each other, but one of them is set back and separately on Benedict Avenue. So thank you very much, and here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's move to the public comment portion of this. Is any member of the public would like to speak, please indicate.
Any members of the public, please wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. As a reminder, each member will have 2 minutes to discuss this item, and this is not for time to ask questions to the applicant or to the commission. All right, I am looking to see if anyone has raised their hand. So far, I do not see any raised hands. For any members of the public wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Chair, I do not see any hands raised. You can now close the public.
Okay, I will close the public comment portion of this case. Something we haven't done, maybe Ms. Chekowitz, could you just give us a quick synopsis of your staff report? I mean, I've read it and looked at it, but what did you find? Any major points?
Mr. Chair, I lost audio connection for a second. Did you ask a question?
Oh, I did. I was just, your staff report is very thorough. I was wondering if you want to hit the highlights of that, sort of a synopsis before we start discussing.
Okay, yes, I can do that. So 51 Broadway was located on what was once Mount Benedict, which was then a portion of it was raised to allow for some more development and I-93 to pass through there. Notably, some of the owners there were related in real estate. I'm going through this trying to hit the highlights for this one item. But otherwise, I would say mainly the people lived here, worked in the area. And other than that, I think 51 Broadway does not have as many individuals in the background as did 53 Broadway. I will note that 51 Broadway was never connected to what was once its mirroring building at 49 Broadway. If you look at 53 and 55, they are clearly attached and mirroring, whereas 49 and 51 were never attached, though they would have once mirrored each other. And that at this time, 51 Broadway does not appear to have had many alterations occurred to it since its construction.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so it stands by itself. It is a, it retains its form. Just looking at the pictures, but it seems like the alterations really are just siding. It got vinyl/aluminum siding and new windows at some point. Otherwise, it seems to be more or less what's always been there. Anybody want to have a go and tell us what you think about this?
It's Vice Chair Kelly, and I will share that the structure is very nicely supported by its cousins next door, and certainly retains its original form and massing. We can very clearly see that it was a historic structure, even though it's now all bandaged up with vinyl and is not displaying any of its original details. But the form and massing is still clearly there. The fenestration appears original. So.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Bauer, do you have any thoughts?
So I would join with what Vice Chair Kelly has said and add also that together with its cousins next door, it provides some streetscape on Broadway as well. And then lastly, the research that's been done about the history of the people who live there also adds to the flavor of these buildings.
Thank you. How about you, Ryan? Mr. Falvey, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing really in addition, Chair Parks, to what's been referenced so far.
Okay. Thank you. I would agree. I mean, also, even though it's not joined with the properties next to it, it has a lot in common with them. Carries the same roof line, the same mansard. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really come off almost as being designed or built together, even though there's been different types of modifications to each. So it does feel like it's a fairly, in the scope of that part of Broadway, not a really long stretch of that streetscape. It is a very cohesive kind of a triad, even though one of it is a grouping of two. I think it definitely has historic value that way, significance for that aspect, and it is a good representation of a Mansfield 4-story, 3-story building of that time period. So I think of it as having some significance for is it Part B? Let me just go back to your staff report here. Historical and architectural significance because of its context of the group of buildings or structures. That's my opinion. Any more thoughts before we think about voting on this?
I do not.
Well, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we vote to find the property at 51 Broadway historically significant.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bauer. So we'll vote on this. So a yes vote is would designate this significant and push it to the next level of preserve status, and no would say no to that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Do a roll call. Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And for findings, I think I would go to, well, I'm willing to hear thoughts from people, but it seems like we're looking at the historic and architectural significance of the structure, particularly its value on the streetscape carrying in relation to the buildings next to it. It's also a good, fairly formally intact representation of that building type. Any other thoughts on that?
Only that it retains its original form and massing.
Okay.
Did you include the streetscape,
Yes.
Chairman?
Yes. I think I did.
So I move that we vote to adopt those findings.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So for the applicant, we didn't really go over the mechanics of this process at the beginning. I don't know how familiar with it, but the demo delay ordinance is a two-step process, and what we just did was to kick this to another stage, which is a preferably preserved hearing, where we say, okay, it's significant now. Is it better that we preserve it or not? So that'll be the case with the other all projects in this category. So the next month we'll have a public hearing and come back and take it to the next level. And since you're the same applicant, I believe, for the next two cases, let's just go into those. 53 Broadway. Anything you want to say about 53 Broadway?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, you would need to formally open and call the case.
Got ahead of myself. So the next case is HPC DMO 2022.02, which is 53 Broadway. Applicant is Ben Rogan. The owner is CDA Realty LLC. Proposals to demolish principal structure. We have an applicant.
Yes, thank you again, commissioners. In terms of explaining the process, thank you very much for going through that. Yes, we do understand that the next step would be another public hearing. discussing whether it should be preferably preserved. So thank you for going through that step in the process. In terms of any additional comments, I think, again, here to answer any questions that you might have or planning staff might have in this process, and otherwise happy to hear your comments and public comment on this matter.
Okay. Thank you. And just to interject before we go with the public comment, this proposal was to remove the right half of a duplex. So if anybody, I don't know if members of the public are curious, but this would leave the left part intact and just remove the right. And having said that, let's open this hearing to the public comment portion. Case.
Thank you. To the members of any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. As a reminder, each member is limited to 2 minutes for public comment on each item. And Mr. Chairman, I am looking through to see if anyone has raised their hand. At this time, I do not see anyone with their hands raised. I'm doing one more pass through. All right, Mr. Chairman, no members of the public have raised their hand. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I've closed the public comment portion of this hearing, this case. So, yeah, I have some issues with removing part of, one half of a building that was designed as a duplex. That's fundamental. I think that's an issue, but actually we're not really, I view that portion of this building significant because it is part of a larger structure, and the other, to remove it would render the entire building structured, would do damage to it. And it's kind of, if we've ever had a case where someone proposed to remove half of a building for demo. Maybe Mr. Bauer's been here longer than I have.
No, I can't say I remember that, and it seems particularly odd if you're considering that this is a group of, in effect, sort of 4 buildings. The half of this building that they want to remove, the half of the building they want to leave standing, the building that's next to it, which they want to remove, and the building that's behind it that they want to remove. So it is quite a perplexing proposal, since when I was looking at stuff, I was assuming all of these are coming down, and was looking to see where the information was about the second half of this duplex, only to discover that their plan is to leave it. It would be really helpful, I think, if we could get some explanation from them about why they're making this bizarre proposal.
Hi, yes, Jordan here, Smith with Sullivan & Worcester, counsel for the applicant. It's simply that we are only putting forth a proposal to remove structures that we currently own. It is really as simple as that. And so I can answer other questions, but there's no other reason behind it than that.
Thank you.
So I see this property holding the same characteristics as we discussed for 51, that it retains its original form and massing, even though some of its detail is missing. But more importantly, as originally built and as it exists now, it's part of a duplex. And so to remove it would be to destroy the original intent of the building. And so that just seems wrong. So I am very much not in favor of seeing this building go. And so I do think it's historically significant. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Bauer?
I agree with everything Vice Chair Kelly has said. It, as I said, this just seems like a very strange proposal, and the explanation that we got seems like no real explanation at all to do something that's going to involve 3 of the 4 plots and leave half of a duplex there. As a practical matter, it's definitionally impossible to demolish only half of this building, since where the line is between the 2 halves was never intended to be exposed to the public. I have a mental image of this coming down and this building sitting there with no walls on that side. It's just impossible.
Thank you. How about you, Ryan? Mr. Felby?
It also strikes me as being manifest, although this is beyond our jurisdiction, it strikes me as being manifestly done with the intent to make it impossible for the current owners to hold on to that building, so that they will sell it to these folks and then be able to get the 4th piece of land, which seems to me a truly outrageous proposal.
No, I don't have anything of substance to add beyond what's been stated, Chair Parks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, at this point, we're addressing just the significance of that half of this building, and I believe it has significance in relation to the overall bit. Like, we have to look at that building as a cohesive whole. That's really a streetscape issue,
Right.
although it's connected to its streetscape in this case. And as we've just mentioned in the previous case, it also has a relationship to the building on the other side of it, because it's has a similar kind of bay pattern and the same mansard and the same height, eave line, etc. And this is also fairly old. I think what did our staff report say? This was 1870s, somewhere like that. So it's been around for 150 years, give or take. Unless somebody else has anything else to do, I guess we could move with a vote.
Yeah, I move that we vote to find 53 Broadway historically significant.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Okay. All in favor, say yes.
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 Whatever.
Yes.
Roll call, Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And the findings, I think, will be largely the same as the for 51 Broadway, which is its contribution to the streetscape, that it's an intact form and massing and fenestration of its original building. I think we can keep it at that. Any other thoughts on findings?
I think it's important to indicate that it is vital to the integrity, the historic integrity of the overall structure, which includes 55 Broadway.
Yeah.
That its removal would be to grievous harm to that structure's historical significance.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to accept these findings?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So applicant, this situation, we'll bring this to a preferably preserved hearing. Also, just to go back and give you more background on the status, should this be designated preferably reserved, it starts a review period where we can review options for keeping it. It also addresses ideas such as memorializing or documenting. There are lots of things that could come about in the process of reviewing project during that 18-month period. And certainly there are things that could happen that would reduce that period if we come to a consensus on, what will happen with it. Sometimes it involves losing the building but keeping certain portions of it or documenting it in a certain way. Sometimes it involves reusing it somehow. So definitely more to the story. So we've finished with that one. The next case on our agenda is HPC DMO 2022.03, 11 Benedict Avenue. Applicant is Ben Rogan. The owner is Christopher and Lauren Galvin. Proposal to demolish principal structure. We have an applicant here.
Hi, yes. Again, Jordan Smith, Sullivan Worcester Land Use Council, to the applicant. Thank you, members of the commission, for hearing this proposal, and Chair Parks, thank you for addressing, what we know is the next part of the process, and having obviously the next public hearing, and whether it should be preferably preserved, and the demolition period, and working through what can be a memorandum of agreement or some other way that we can memorialize, pay homage to the streetscape, these buildings, the history on the site, and we know this is the first step of being in front of you and having these discussions and having them with staff, and we look forward to going through that process. In terms of this building in particular, as noted previously, it's right behind these other two buildings that have been discussed, kind of just around the corner. And if there are any further questions, happy to answer them as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak about this case?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and I will unmute you. As a reminder, each member of the public is limited to 2 minutes per topic. Mr. Chairman, so far I do not see any hands raised. So I'm going to give it one more pass. All right, Mr. Chairman, you may close the public comment.
Okay, we'll close the public comment portion of this case. And I was just looking at your staff report. Is there anything you'd like to add about this structure, Ms. Chekowitz, from your staff report?
Only that it has had a few more additions than some of the other items we reviewed tonight. There's been a lean-to and an addition to the lean-to the rear and addition to the front. So it has had some changes over time, but I would say for the most part retains the same massing that it has since its construction. Other than that, we don't know much about the people who lived there. We were unable to find information outside of the 1920s really about the residents of the site.
Okay, thank you. It appears from it was built sometime between 1870 and 74, you think? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. Based on the maps and some of the information we have from that. Likely by 1874, that's the first historic map we have for the site, and it shows the building on site much in the same form it is now.
Okay. And the whole area was platted in 1870, so it had to happen after that. Okay. Thoughts on the project from the commission? Or the structure?
So I will say that even though it has had some alterations over the years and it's vinyl clad and not displaying its original details, it still very clearly reads as a late 19th century structure and is a sibling to the property across the street, which has the same first story bay and roof line and overall form at the front portion of the house. That house seems more modified with an addition, but clearly part of a group on Benedict.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Mr. Bauer?
So I agree with that. There's certainly, although it's been, it's had its windows, the windows themselves changed and vinyl siding, you can very much see what it was like in its earlier days on it. And I also think it contributes to the streetscape with the cousin across the street.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. How about you, Ryan?
I share the sentiments that have been expressed, Chair Parks. I don't have anything additional to add on this particular building.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I would agree. It has a lot of the houses in the area have been glossed over with siding and things like that, so that's kind of hard to find something that doesn't have that. But it does have all of its massing. Little dormers up on the roof might actually be original. It's hard to tell, but it's got a rear L, which is common. So I think it has value, significance, because it's intact mass-wise. Fenestration mostly is the same. And as Robin mentioned, it does have a mirror across the street, stylistically. So it has some streetscape. It's not as cohesive a streetscape, but it does have some place there. Those are my thoughts. Anything else? If not,
I
we can go to-
move, yeah, I move that we vote to find 11 Benedict historically significant.
Second,
Okay, all in favor of designating 11 Benedict Avenue significant, say aye.
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 right,
Roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
yes,
and I vote yes as well. And for findings, I would again go back to Part B on the staff report and say it's because of its retains its original massing of a 1870s Italianate building that's role in the streetscape, has some place there in terms of the house across the street. I think there were no associations with people, so we'll leave that one off. Anything else?
I move that we vote to adopt those findings.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
yes.
and I vote yes as well. So, Mr. Rogan, we have, all three of these have been pushed to next month. I think staff would have some instructions on where to go in terms of filing. I know there's some deadlines to submit materials, stuff like that.
Yes, I believe he has submitted everything needed to be placed on the next month's meeting, but I will have to look into that. And I will go ahead and reach out to the applicant team tomorrow.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've now come to the determinations of preferably preserved status. That's the second part of the demo delay process. And the first case in that category is HPC DMO 2021.32, 17 Allen Street. Applicant is 13 to 17 Allen Street LLC. The owner is Sal Rivera. Proposal is to demolish a physical structure. Do we have an applicant here?
Yes, good evening. This is Attorney Ann Vigorito. I represent the applicant. I'm joined this evening by the applicant, Representative Michael Koreknik. He is on. If he could be unmuted, I'd appreciate that. Also, our architect, Narius Bubnelis from Khalsa Design, if he could be unmuted. Albert Rex from MacRosty Historic Advisors. He is also part of our team and will be speaking this evening. So if they could all be unmuted, they will stay muted until, necessary, but they are part of the team. So last month, this property at 17 Allen Street was voted to be, was voted historically significant. There's been many buildings. Allen Street seems to be a common street coming before the board, and many of the other properties on that street have been deemed to not be preferably preserved. The team and myself, we've had many discussions. We had commissioned MacRosty Historic to, kind of give us a review, some thoughts that, we may have missed as a team. And Albert Rex did do a thorough investigation and project. And I'd like him to basically go through some of the highlights of things. We did have a letter. Fortunately, it got to, it was sent over to Historic yesterday, so I do understand you don't have an actual copy of it, but Albert Rex is going to discuss some of those findings at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Albert Rex, you are self-muted. You have been unmuted by staff. So you'll just need to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak today.
Too many buttons. Did that one work? Good. Actually, there's too many programs between Zoom and everything else. Albert Rex with MacRosty Historic Advisors. We are a historic consulting firm. We do tax credits, National Register nominations. We work across the country on all sorts of different projects. We were asked by the applicant to take a look at the building, also specifically to take a look at the findings from the commission and opine from our perspective relative to the building's historic integrity related to the criteria that were put forth by the commission. We would agree with the research that was done on the building relative to its approximate date. It was probably constructed sometime around 1874, we would say. We'd agree with that. And that it was added on to by the Farrell family during that period, probably taking partially its current form by 1900. There were some other outbuildings, and the adjacent lot was adjoined to the property where it looked like maybe a store was happening there, or maybe the soap company that was part of the family business was there. We didn't find any direct connection to that in any of our research. I'm not sure if staff did or not. Looking at the building and form itself, certainly it's vernacular, right? It's workers housing. It's a fairly simple form. Some of the buildings on the street have a more Italianate flair to them. Oriels, other additions that may have more fenestration or architectural components. It was interesting. I mean, obviously this house was built to fit the lot. And then as you look at the rear addition, especially on the third floor addition, we were unable to do any permit research in advance of this, but I would say the third floor was obviously pretty later added relative to its relationship surrounding the chimney, and then it extends out beyond the footprint of the floor below it, probably just to maximize the size of that floor. Does have later add a vestibule on the front, and then the later stairs to the rear, most likely added when it was converted to 3 or 4 apartments at some point. So generally, it's difficult with vernacular buildings because they all kind of keep their shape and form, but in this case, The front part has some of its shape and form. The rear certainly looks like it's been changed pretty significantly. And that obviously the windows are later replaced with 1/1s. There's vinyl siding. There's not a real great view of the foundation. It does appear to probably be concrete coated or mortared over brick, maybe earlier. Overall, it doesn't feel like the building has a significant amount of integrity relative to the simple nature of its design. Yes, the scale and massing is there, but much of the material of the building is lost if it did have any material. As I noted, some of the other buildings in the street have more bracketed cornices, for instance, and other elements that just don't seem to exist on this building. So we didn't feel that it individually raised itself to a level preferably preserved from an architectural perspective. And thinking about it in context of, looking at if building is not individually eligible, and I think we would all agree when you look at a building individually, there's just a higher scale that it has to meet. You look at this building then from the context of what else exists on the street, and it feels like there's been a lot of loss on especially the south end of the street relative to going past the block of 13 to 17. There's been some new commercial construction built down there. And, if you look at the earlier Sanborn and other maps and aerial photos, you'll see that what was a fairly well intact street has suffered a number of losses and demolitions over the years. And so from a contextual perspective, it feels like the siting of the building is on its site, on its lot, but overall that the neighborhood itself or the street itself has lost its context, and there's not really a historic district or collection of vernacular buildings here that read as one. The association with the alderman Donnelly that was in this, Peter Donnelly, that was at the building, owned the building between 1918 and 1920, while staff had also found the newspaper article about his participation in the erection of a statue relative, or a monument relative to those who served in World War I, which he did himself. The association with him is interesting and adds a little more character to the building from that association perspective, but it's not a long association. It appeared that he purchased the house and sold the house within a 2-year period. It's unclear if he actually lived in the house, rented the house, was there partially. We would assume that given this, there would probably be other properties more closely associated with Alderman Donnelly in the city of Somerville, or more closely associated with his family. It wasn't the original family home. And obviously, even if it wasn't the original family home, he had a very short association with the property. So generally looking at the two criteria that this was put forth under, A, the important association, and B, the kind of the architectural significance, we did not find that it, even with the strong research of the staff, we just don't think it raised to the level of preferably preserved because of the conditions I just outlined. As I said, we did not get it to pull permits, which is another way that we often look at this to try to determine more exactly when these changes happen to the building. But certainly, beyond the kind of a scale and massing of the front portion of the building, the rest of the building really feels like it has lost some of its integrity relative to other elements, even with its kind of more vernacular feel and its association with workers' housing that would have been found in this area during the same period. Thanks. And I can answer any questions we might have from our side, but I think the staff general survey of the maps and the other histories was good. We just confirmed that, and again, just feel from criteria A and B, it doesn't quite meet the standard for the level of significance from a preferably preserved perspective.
Thank you. Was there somebody else in your group that you mentioned a few other people? Is anybody else who wants to speak?
Mr. Chair, Albert was the one we wanted to discuss his findings. I mean, this time, if you have any questions for us, we're, ready and able to answer those.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak about this project?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. As a reminder, each member of the public has 2 minutes to speak on this item. Mr. Chairman, I am looking through the list of attendees. All right, Ron Cavallo, I see that your hand has been raised. You are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I asked Sarah White, and she very kindly confirmed that I was, when I went to see 17 Allen, looking at the correct property, when I saw it, I was frankly shocked at such a property with zero architectural merit, zero original detail, and of almost no original architectural merit would be considered preferably preserved. In addition to that, I learned at the last meeting that the owner of this property is an employee of the city of 27 years. I think that has significance. Additionally, I learned that that owner has economic issues. I was frankly aghast that those issues were not considered as part of the decision-making. I find it almost impossible to believe that this property, which is a lesser property on a lesser street that would greatly benefit from development, would be considered preferably preserved. And I think it's a disgrace. I'm very angry. This part of the city has a lot of potential, none of which is being realized.
30 seconds.
Yeah. I want to make it clear that I think it is wrong to preserve this structure.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak?
Any other members of the public wishing to speak, please raise your hand. All right, I'm going to give it one last pass through, but I do not see anyone else's hands up. All right, Mr. Chairman, there are no other members of the public wishing to speak. You can close public comment.
Okay, I will close the public comment portion of this case. And bring it up to the commission. Who has thoughts on this?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to clarify a couple of the points that were in comment from Mr. Cavallo. First, we've not yet determined whether the property will be preferably preserved. It was determined to be historically significant at our last meeting. And in that process, we as the commission are not able to take into account the current owner's particular situation or anything of that nature. I understand Mr. Cavallo has a differing opinion about the property's merits, and that's certainly something that's open for discussion and that is part of our decision-making process for historical significance and for preferably preserving a property. Unfortunately, we are not able to take into account at the historically significant stage any consideration of what would be better for the city in terms of other, future development or anything like that. We are very limited in our scope of what we can consider for historically significant. And so just to be clear on that, in case any attendees to this meeting had question about that. So just wanted to clarify. With regard to this particular property and whether it is preferably preserved, I do think that its contribution to the overall streetscape in its scale and massing is important. It does have a large addition at the back, which is clearly not original. It does not retain any of its original details, the corbels and things that the applicant's commenter discussed. But I do think that it's an important structure for the streetscape, such as it is for the time being.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, just to clarify on that, we don't, in the demolition delay ordinance, we're not allowed to take into consideration for either stage, as I understand it, the financial situation of the applicant. It's just the project, and that is the way it is. Mr. Bauer or Mr. Falvey, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I think I agree with Vice Chair Kelly's comments.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the consultant that you have, the applicant.
Albert Rex.
Albert, yeah, I appreciate your comments on that. I think, yes, in Somerville here, we have our earliest buildings, except for maybe 2 cases, are these little early mid-19th century, straddling a few decades forward, worker housing. And what to me is actually remarkable about this street is that you have 4 in a row here. You have, in terms of the streetscape on this side here, a pretty good representation of what this street was like mass-wise back in the early days when there was a lot of totally different industry in the square there. So in some ways, to me, this is actually kind of a important little remnant of the history of Union Square that, but for a little tiny stretch across in the little triangle between Prospect and blanking on the other name, there's really not much of this left. So, Webster, yes. That's why I have viewed these. Otherwise, one might look at it and say it's mundane. It's just a little, like you say, vernacular house. But taken together, granted they're disappearing, this is one of the few little areas in Somerville where we have some of this remaining. There's some areas over by Clyde Street and over there. So, yeah, there's nothing fancy here. It's lost. It's the Italianate. They usually would have had a bracketed hood. There would be the only little touch of elegance that they could afford. But the massing is still there. It's had an addition off the back, which is distinct. So, it doesn't detract from the mass of the piece in front. And that's why I felt like every other one of these buildings that we've been hearing lately, significant and impressively preserved. That's kind of why I still lean that way with this one. It's unfortunate that people kind of at first glance don't really perceive that because they just see a building that doesn't look pretty and Victorian. And in some ways, that's our role as a commission, is to kind of remind people why history matters. It's not always pretty and beautiful. And we're not a urban planning department. It's not our role to decide what's the highest and best use of this neighborhood. We're the historic commission. So that's kind of our scope. That's my 2 cents worth there. Who else? Anybody else? Ryan, do you have anything you want to contribute?
No, I mean, I appreciate Vice Chair Kelly's comments about what our purview is and agree with the general remarks about why this was deemed significant. Nothing to add beyond that.
Thank you. In theory, 4 buildings and re-sided them and put different windows in, they would pretty much look just like they did 150 years ago, 130 years ago. Actually kind of remarkable that way. We're only here to talk about this one, 13 to 17 Allen Street.
Mr. Chair, if I could, we've done a lot of walking on that street as a team, and we know about a lot of the other projects going on. I mean, 19 to 27 Allen Street is going to be demoed, it's set to be demolished. 11 and 13 Allen Street are as well. So I'm confused as to, or the entire team, as to what streetscape is there to really compare this to. And this particular site, you know, has lesser components in many ways, as Albert pointed out in his discussion. I can understand this historically significant, but the preferably preserved really seems like a leap of faith for us.
So it's sort of like two wrongs making a right. Since the other one's going, we might as well just lose this one too.
Yeah.
I don't. When I hear your point, I don't think we can really take it in that context. It would be a little inconsistent for us to decide the other ones had been preferably preserved and this one isn't, because the other, like, you're just throwing the towel there. And as you know, that this process of reviewing the other buildings, and we eventually came to an agreement, a memorandum of agreement, and those didn't wait their entire demo period. So there will be a process for this that could result in any number of outcomes that way too. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
No, I would move that we vote to find the property historic, preferably preserved.
Okay, second.
Second that motion.
Okay, so a yes vote would designate this preferably preserved, a no would not. All in favor, say yes or aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Aye. Roll call, Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Bauer.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And for the findings, I would adopt, we kind of covered that, its value in a streetscape, albeit ephemeral at this point, contribution as a 19th century worker housing, and its connection to the early workers of Union Square, meat packing, brick making, that sort of thing, as a class of people, not as a particular person. It retains its original form with an addition, 2 additions. So it's fairly intact map-wise, not siding and detailing. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
If there's nothing else to add, I would move that we vote to adopt those findings.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the findings as we just specified? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, roll call Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So there we have it. Thank you for your work, and let's take this to the next step. We can meet with staff and look at alternatives for the demo delay period.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I can address the applicants, we will have our administrative assistant reach out to set up our first MOA meeting with you to discuss memorandums of agreement.
Okay, the next case is determination of preferably reserved. Status is HBC DMO 2021.24, 1252 Broadway. The applicant is Annette Thomas. The owner is 1252 Broadway, Somerville LLC. Proposals to demolish the principal structure. We have an applicant here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Once again, this is Attorney Ann Vigorito. I am joined by my team, Elon Sassoon, John Tobias, they're the developers. Also, Evan Stillman from Khalsa Design is on as well. He's the architect on this project. As a refresher, this is not the norm. This is one that a building has been built in its place. And when we were before you, and it was historically significant, we'd explained that Mr. Sassoon, Mr. Tobias, they do quite a bit of development in the city, and they purchased this project from another developer who had already received permitting and so forth. And I believe he'd come through HPC in some capacity, but I think there was a particular wall that had to stay up. But in any event, they obtained a building permit. And as we well know, building permits are generally granted if HPC has not, given an approval or, a sign off of sorts. So, these developers, they're not new to this city. They do quite a few projects here. They've won a couple of historic preservation awards over the years. So this is something that, it's somewhat of a case of first impression for us as a team. But, they don't thumb their nose at the historical preservation. They would rather work, and if the building isn't complete, but if there was a way they could incorporate some historical components, that would, maybe they could work with staff. Once again, we have Evan Stillman, who's our architect, and he has worked with historical staff over the years quite successfully, working out MOAs and other, historical plans. So, we feel that we have a very strong team that can, satisfy the needs here. Like I keep saying, it's just something that isn't the norm. We're here with, the building has already been demolished, partially because, they assumed they had a building permit. Started working, and there was a storm of sorts, and that I think took down part of the building that I think was supposed to remain. So there's been a number of situations, and I hate blaming things on COVID, but COVID did play a role here because of the miscommunications and misunderstandings, perhaps at the time they obtained their building permit from inspectional service. With that said, I figure I would, turn it back over to the board for questions from everyone.
Okay, thank you. Are there members of the public who'd like to speak about this case?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. As a reminder, we have a limit of 2 minutes for each member of the public on each topic. All right, Mr. Chair, I'm looking through the list, and so far I do not see any hand raised. I'm going to look one more time. All right, Mr. Chairman, there is no one from the public wishing to speak on this item. You may close the public comment.
Okay, glad I closed the public comment portion of this case. And just to recap, so this is confusing. That there was this was done under the previous demo delay ordinance, correct? The permit was obtained, which established different criteria for what constituted demolition.
If I remember correctly, the applicant came forward, and at the time it did not appear that they were going to be demolishing as much as they were. And then the entirety of the building was essentially demolished, which was vastly more than what was looked at to begin with.
Hi, this is Elon Sassoon, the developer. Can I speak for a moment?
Yes, please.
So basically, like Ann said, when we got the building, we bought it from another developer, and it was approved for 5 units. When the zoning changed, we bought it after the zoning changed, and we went back to the planning board and we had it approved for 7 units. When we had the project approved, we were under the understanding that there wasn't any historical issues. And one of the reasons why I was under that understanding is because every time we go for our demo permit or foundation permit or building permit, I get a notification from Hans saying, you need to go through the Historic Preservation Committee. I did not get that notification in this case at all. And I always get that from Hans. So somehow it was an oversight. We didn't get that. And we got all of our permits from the city. I got my demo permit, foundation permit, and building permit. Now, in the plans that Evan and Kalsa Design did, there were 2 walls that were saved in the plans. So we had no idea that there was anything to do with historic because we got all our permits and we started building the building. But there were 2 walls that were going to be saved in the plans, the front and the right side. We saved them both until that hurricane came over the summer. And we were told by inspectional services that it's dangerous. It wasn't shored up properly. And we removed the front wall, but we kept the side right wall. So the side right wall is still there from the original house, but we rebuilt the rest of it and the roof and everything. So the roof is almost on. The whole shell of the house is almost together. So we weren't told that we were given the permits, which we usually would never be given if we had to go through historic. And like Ann said, of course, we would never do something deceitful. We've won the Historic Preservation Award 2 times for 132 Perkins Street, 42 Bow Street. And, this is just a really unfortunate misunderstanding. And we would like to rectify it by making this an incredibly gorgeous historical house, or, however you see fit.
Thank you. So that's just to clarify. So, and this would be a question for staff. Under the guideline, under the ordinances that existed then, was there a determination by Hans that because they're keeping 2 walls that this didn't constitute a demolition?
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I do not have any information on that. I can always look into that and get back to you. If you want to continue speaking, I can go ahead and try to find out from my colleagues.
And the reason where I'm going with that is if, well, actually, this is kind of an odd case, isn't it? We're really here technically just to discuss the preferably preserved status of the structure as it existed originally. It would seem that there are 2 options. One would be to basically recreate the portions of the building that, as existing, allowed this to not be considered a demolition at the time. I don't know. What does everybody else in the commission think? I'm kind of ruminating here.
So I have a few
So
thoughts. There's so much.
understand that there may be. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Oh, no, Dick, please, you go first.
Okay. So I mean, it certainly appears that there is some fault on the part of the city here in not flagging this. But in my mind, that does not completely relieve the applicant of responsibility because they know about the demolition review ordinance and what the requirements are. And they can't, I think it's not okay for them to just say, well, if nobody has called us on it, then we don't have to worry about it. It would be like saying, well, I don't have to file my tax return this year, and if the IRS wants to do something, they'll let me know. Or I can file my tax return, but I can leave off some of my income, and if the IRS catches me, they'll let me know. I think particularly people who do a lot of work in the city know what the rules are, and they've got some responsibility to think and to inquire. And so even though it hadn't been flagged by inspectional services, they should have known to say, this is beginning to approach a demolition. is there a demolition review permit that's needed here? Instead of saying, well, nobody told us about demolition review, so we don't have to worry about it.
Can I make a comment on that, Mr. Bauer? Because that's not exactly, we would never do that. We're like, oh, they didn't tell us, let's just go ahead. We have 7 buildings going up in Somerville, and we just thought that this did go through historic and that they asked us to save 2 walls and that we were good to go. So it was never something like, oh, we didn't do it and let's try to sneak something by. That would never, we would never do that. That wasn't the case.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
I apologize. I did not mean to imply that you were trying to sneak something through, and I did not speak well when I said that. So I apologize, because that was not my intent to imply that you were trying to sneak something through. My point was simply that you have a responsibility to know what you need and to inquire, and that's true even if Inspectional Services hasn't flagged it for you. But I apologize for using the phrase sneaking it through, because I know that was not your intention and I did not mean it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think we may want to move on from the intent of the like how the demolition happened and move on to making a determination and findings, as I think that is the goal for the meeting.
Yes, thanks for keeping us on track. I mean, in a general sense, I feel like I would consider, if this were the original building, I would consider it preferably preserved because of what it was.
right.
So to me, the process would be to, well, if we vote that way, to have that and then discuss what does that mean practically speaking for this case. Is it a matter of rebuilding the front wall, or is there some other aspect? But I don't think it, well, I don't want to conjecture, but that's the situation. Does anybody else have any other angles on the missing?
So I do think it's important for us to establish what happened here, because we want to be sure that this doesn't happen again, because this is clearly, it's a loss for the city that the building is gone. And it's, you know, an unnecessary amount of discussion and, you know, work and bother for the applicant team, for staff, for the commission, because this could have been, you know, handled and avoided differently. So I think we need to understand what happened. Obviously, the circumstances of this particular case are complex, where the property changed hands sort of midstream, and there's COVID and a hurricane and, you know, sort of all these things happening. But I do think it's important for us to piece together how this was done. And by us, I do unfortunately mean staff. So, but I think we need to know that, so that if there is some sort of missing link in terms of communication or, you know, feedback or whatever it is, that if there needs to be some step inserted to make sure that this does not occur again, then I think that should be done. But as to where we go from here, from, you know, the reality of the building as it is now, and, you know, what we think we might have thought about things had we been approaching this at the outset. I agree that, you know, based on what we know of the structure as it was, we likely would have found it to be preferably preserved, and in that case, there would have been discussions around the design and whatnot to, so. And that's the piece that's unknown and missing now. And I don't know how we sort of claw any of that back at this stage.
Thanks, Robin. I think to do a post-mortem on it, it seems to me that under the previous demo delay ordinance, one could get away with leaving just 2 walls and have it not be considered demolished. I don't believe the current ordinance lets you do that anymore. I think you have to read more of it. I don't have that text in front of me. So that might solve somewhat a situation like this. It sounds like that's what they were planning to do. And for various reasons, they lost the front wall or took it away. And here we are, like no one at that point said, hey, we should do this. I don't think it's on ISD to say, by the way, make sure you keep that wall. And I mean, that was the design that allowed the project to go forward. I assume that I don't have the drawings in front of me, but the design for the structure assumed that wall remained. So it's not like recreating it throws a monkey wrench in anything.
True.
So as Wendy said, I'm getting ahead of that. I think the first step would be to look at the preferably preserved status of this, and then how we move out of that, like what the applicant needs to do to kind of resolve that. As here meetings with staff or something like that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, also just to remind you that in addition to declaring it preferably preserved or not preferably preserved, you also have the option, if you look at the end of the report, of not preferably preserved with conditions. So I just want everyone to remember that.
With conditions, yes, we seldom do that, but so
I think that makes sense in this case because there's nothing remaining to be preferably preserved. And so, not preferably preserved seems like the correct thing, but I do think that we need conditions, that the design move forward with staff input.
I agree.
Sorry, this is Evan from Call for Design.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that we will be replicating the existing front facade on the right side, so it will look like the existing structure that was there. If you'd like, I can share my screen and walk over the proposed plans with you.
Sure.
That would be great.
Evan, was that you just speaking now?
I'm sorry?
Evan, you're the one speaking right now, correct?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give you permission to be a presenter. All right, you should have the ability to share your screen.
Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So on the front facade, the right side here, this is where we would be replicating the existing structure. So this is the wall that we planned on keeping, but we had to remove a large portion of this and the roof because of that hurricane. We will be keeping the scallops at the gables, and we will be carrying that material to the new addition. And we're also planning on replicating the gable bracket that was there, and then adding a gable bracket over the main front porch. Over on the side, we plan on carrying the gable geometry across the left side and right side, and then we'd be replicating the scallop shingles on this side and the right side as well. I think I have a sheet showing the materials. There you go. So cladding, we're going to be using some cementitious cladding in white. We're going to be matching the color, and then just some pearl gray hardy shakes at the band across the side and within the gables. Otherwise, we'd be replicating the existing window trim. We're going to keep the 6/1s everywhere, and then we're going to match the existing roof. So all in all, the existing structure, which I do have the Google Street View here, it'll read the same when it's constructed as it did before. So this massing here is the same as the massing that we're showing on the right side here. We're just adding to the left and to the rear of it.
Yep. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Is there any kind of an offset between the front of the existing and then the addition on the left? Or is it just a
Yes,
corner?
the left side is proud of the existing.
What's proud of it? Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to get to a site plan. So the new addition sits forward of the existing building here.
Okay. And this is the design that was approved at permitting way back. This is not a revised one?
That's correct.
Okay. It would seem to me, and this is assuming that this design, the amount of construction that was kept conformed with the demo delay. Because I remember the previous ordinance allowed some pretty creative stuff like this, that if the condition were that this design be executed, that wall be recreated as it was, that what was taken down be rebuilt.
Yes.
For the drawing could have been submitted, that would be adequate. You all agree?
Yes.
I mean, that's basically recreating the condition as it was allowed to be for this then conforming drawing or project. So I think maybe if we could do a not preferably preserved with that condition, that would be one resolution. How about you? Dick, what do you think of this?
My preference, I think, would be to find it preferably preserved, which is what we would have done were the building's still there, and then to treat this as a resolution of that. It comes to the same place, and I don't, if other people feel strongly that we should go the not preserved with conditions, I could live with that. But my preference would be to make the determination that we think is the correct one, which is preferably preserved, and then resolve the actual demolition based on the design that we're satisfied with.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's sort of a shell game. Like either way, they could come back the very next day with this stat and we write an MOA and there we go. It's just a different process. That's all. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Robin.
No, I think Mr. Bauer probably, it's correct what he's saying is that, we should acknowledge that had this followed the more typical order of things, that we would have found it to be preferably preserved. And so acknowledging that is valuable.
Sure. What's your Ryan?
I mean, as you said, Eric, I mean, I think it seems like somewhat of a shell game, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, they're this far project right now, and I guess I'm not sure what one decision over the other buys you necessarily. And I appreciate the effort that's been put in here to, of course, retain, the facade from what was supposed to be remaining. So I guess that's kind of the end game, right? So to a certain extent. So, I mean, I defer to Dick and his, Mr. Bauer's knowledge of legally what would make more sense in terms of calling it preferably preserved or with conditions. But yeah, I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing here. I don't know if we have anything else that is this group or any of your, Eric in particular, Chair Parks, on elements to add to the facade, or if you're comfortable with that. It seems to match it quite well.
Yeah, when we had a project here, and again, I'm assuming that this project passed muster at the time under the zoning that existed, it would seem odd to go back and require something more that wasn't already required in this. If by recreating this design exactly as it is was okay then, why wouldn't it be now? The only difference is that there are new materials in front instead of old, but that's theoretically impossible to bring back the old. So I think I'm fine either way. It's I'm not as familiar with this declaring something not preferably preserved with conditions. That's something we haven't done much. I think we did it once or twice before. I don't really know the mechanics of that with the enforcement mechanism, and it doesn't get recorded with the deed and all that kind of stuff. So I'd be fine either way, and I guess I'd go back to the old way of doing it. Mr. Bauer feels strong that way. I would go along with that. Just call it preferably preserved, and then understanding we're not going to drag it out, but the applicant can come back with this. I write an MOA immediately saying go forward with this, build it per the drawings, and then sign that off and go. Is there anything else, Wendy or Ms. Chekowicz, that we're not bringing into this discussion?
Yes, so if, Mr. Chairman, the one thing I will say, and I was just double checking with Sarah White right now, the conditions essentially need to be proportional. So where we can't require an entire design, you can require that the facade remain on the one side like they stated. So the conditions would need to be scaled back to be proportional to there, for instance, 4 examples in the report provided to you for the item, and the 4 that it has listed are photographic documentation of the building to be demolished, architectural renderings of the building to be demolished, identification of materials for salvage of material, a plan for installation of historic or interpretive signage or near the site. So it would need to be more proportional and scaled to that. If you are okay with the design, you could always declare preferably preserved, and then they could just come in for this.
I think that in this case, that makes more sense to go about it that way, because we're looking for something more than just documentation and that sort of thing. So perhaps we should go forward like that. Anyone else doesn't have any thoughts, we can have a motion on that.
So in that case, I move that we vote to find the property preferably preserved.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Seconded by Ryan. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. And the findings, we do need findings, would be the building as it previously existed was that retained its the Gothic detailing. What do we use for the significance? Let's look this up. Who wants to add anything to that?
That it retained its original form massing and retained considerable original detailing.
Original detailing, form and massing. Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just for clarity for the applicant and myself, so it's being deemed preferably preserved, but they can come in with their MOA next month. Is that the thought process here?
Yes. And it'll be a discussion with you and staff, but to me, it would be simply a matter of reconstructing the walls that were indicated to remain per the project drawings, the permit drawings you had.
So essentially with the permit drawings that Evan Stillman from CALSA went through, those would be your thoughts your thoughts would be those would be incorporated into an MOA through staff.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I'm not personally thinking we're looking for anything other than what was there.
Okay. We just wanted the clarity among the team. I appreciate that.
I mean, everybody else, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have findings, and I guess we're ready for a vote on that, or a motion.
I move that we vote to adopt the findings as just discussed.
Okay, a second.
I second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We'll call Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So yes, if anyway, just to come back, meet with staff, and we'll proceed with an MOA. I think that's for the next hearing.
Thank you.
very much.
Sure,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that is the last case. The next order of business we have is minutes. Do we have any minutes to review? I don't believe so.
No, we have not received them yet.
Okay. The CPC update, that would normally be.
So the MOA,
Sorry?
what's that? Memorandum of what? Understanding, what does it say?
Agreement.
Acknowledgement?
Memorandum of agreement.
So we do that by redrawing or reconstructing the front facade the way it was before, correct?
Yeah, it'll be a text doc.
Yeah.
Well, your staff, yeah. I'll let Wendy take it.
Yes, if I can interrupt, Mr. Chairman. We will be reaching out to you
No, I
tomorrow.
think we should call now because we've already reconstructed the front in its rough stage. It has zip board, 2x6 framing, but it's the way it was shown on the plan. It's the architectural features that go on the facade of that front. Evan, so.
Sir, our team will follow up with you tomorrow. We need to draft an MOA, which is the memorandum of agreement. It's an agreement between the city
Okay.
and your team.
All right, so what will you have to do, Evan? We have to draw something?
Oh, I don't think he's talking to us. I think he's just on the phone.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So can we do that in person or does it have to be on the Zoom call?
I'm going to mute him and then he can reach out to us tomorrow because I think he's not
so
talking to us.
in the meantime,
Here's something good. Hold on a minute.
Right. Personal insults coming up shortly.
Exactly.
Yeah, the rest of his team is no longer on, so I'm going to assume that he was talking to his architect and they can
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That was
call us tomorrow.
real. Okay, so we were discussing the CPC update, which I imagine don't have because Alan's not here.
Correct.
Thing on that. Okay. So that is it for the agenda items. Anything else?
That's everything from the agenda.
All right. Well, with that, then I guess we could close the hearing.
Very good.
Is there a motion?
I move that we vote to adjourn.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed?
Motion adjourned.
Okay. Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer. We might have lost Mr. Bauer. He's already adjourned. I vote yes. The yeses carry it. It's 3 out of 4.
I think he moved a little.
A little, like it. All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thanks, Bye-bye.
Second?